Welcome to what we know so far about our 2021 polar bear season. We have a fantastic panel today, but first I'm going to turn it over to Nat Hab's head of field staff, Renata Haas. Off to you, Renata.
Thanks so much, Kendall. And I am so excited to talk about polar bears. And with such a fantastic team with me as well. So today, I am so pleased to note that we have Ben Bressler, who is the president and founder of Natural Habitat Adventures, along with one of our esteemed expedition leaders, Eleanor. And I'd love for Ben for you to give us a quick introduction.
Sure, great. Thank you so much, Renata and Kendall, and I'm just here for a moment to just say hello and to thank you all for joining us. It just means a lot to me during this really challenging year to spend a moment with our guests. I haven't been able to do that in the field, obviously, for many months now, but to spend a moment with you, getting ready for a trip that is so important to us is really important to me. So thank you. You know, I mentioned Churchill is important. It's really important to us as a company, not only because it's important to our business, to our small business, but also because over the past 30 years of running polar bear trips in Churchill, it's become important to us as conservationists and as people. Polar bear tourism is vital for the 800 full-time residents of Churchill, half of which, by the way, work in the tourism business. Polar bear tourism has become such an important part of their economy and has motivated them to promote the protection of these animals. And what's important here is your participation. I want to let you know this is vital. Is that your participation is vital to the protection and survival of bears as a whole. As polar bears have become the very poster child of the fight against climate change. I remember seeing my first bear, and I know for our guests, when you go up and you see a polar bear, you can't help but come home from that experience, seeing a polar bear in the wild, and act as an ambassador for these animals and for our planet. And that's why polar bear tourism is so important to us as a company and as individuals. So I thank you all for coming today. I can't be more excited because things are headed in the right direction. It looks good to be able to run the trips this year. So we're really excited about it, how things are changing in the right direction. And I will leave it now to Renata and Eleanor, who are going to go over some of the details about this year's trips. And I'll just leave you once again with thank you so much for joining.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's always wonderful to have you pop into these webinars, especially with a program that is so close to all of our hearts. I personally have spent quite a bit of time in Churchill, myself and Winnipeg, and absolutely love it up there, and I'm so excited to spend some time. And so thank you, Ben. If you need to pop off, please feel free to do so. Always wonderful to have him join. And then I also wanted to introduce Miss Eleanor. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Renata, and thanks, Kendall and Ben, for bringing us on here. Like you said, I'm an expedition leader here with Natural Habitat, and I am actually a Manitoba-based person. So I am coming to you right now from southern Manitoba, where it was remarkably warm, unlike Churchill, where it is currently remarkably cold by all reports that we're hearing on the ground. So I've been working with Nat Hab for about the last 6 years now, and I've spent a lot of my life in Churchill over the years. So I'm so excited to come here and talk about what this polar bear season is going to look like.
Fantastic. And then again, my name is Renata. I have been working with Natural Habitat Adventures for 7 years. And I have actually been on the logistics side of our polar bear programs. I currently oversee our Northern Lights programs, but I also oversee all of our field staff across all of our destinations. And since COVID has started, I have overseen our team of individuals that have created our protocols during COVID. So what we're going to do during this webinar is take some time time and talk briefly about all things COVID and Canada and just how Nat Hab's created our protocols and what those could look like for this trip. And then also the bulk of it is going to be talking about the absolutely amazing experience that is our polar bear program adventures, which is what everyone on this call wants to take time and talk about. So excited to talk about what makes a natural habitat polar bear trip so exciting, some of the things you can expect, and just more information about how we're handling all things during COVID. And then by the end of it, we will go into frequently asked questions. Now, there are multiple different polar bear itineraries. So some stay in town, some stay on what we call our Tundra Lodge, and some are in between both town and the Tundra Lodge. So today we're going to give you a really large, broad overview of our programs, and we are going to do a follow-up closer to the start of the seasons with more specifics of what you can expect on each of those programs to be able to answer even more of your questions. So that being said, let's dive into the COVID protocol component of what we've been doing over the past year. So first and foremost, I should say that though it's been an incredibly tough year for everyone, we have been running trips at Natural Habitat since last July. We've run successful trips in Yellowstone, the Galapagos, Costa Rica, Mexico, Kenya, and we are in Florida and Canyons, and we're ramping up for a pretty busy summer. And with those trips running, we have had no spread of any COVID cases in our guests, our field staff, or expedition leaders. So that is a big part to do with our COVID protocols that we've put in place. And as you can see from the paper in front of your screen, it has been a tremendous amount of work. So I want to go into a little bit of the background about how we've created our protocols, and then talk a little bit about what's going on in Canada. So with Natural Habitat's COVID protocols, we have set up some specific priorities in developing these. So first and foremost, when we created our initial skeleton for our COVID protocols, we relied heavily on CDC and World Health Organization recommendations. So those guidelines created our skeleton. And then we started working with other leaders within the adventure travel and outdoor industries to exchange best practices and ensure that we were meeting the highest standards when it came to the development of these protocols. The next thing that we had to make sure that we were creating a process for is vetting all of those partners that we work with worldwide. When you go on our polar bear program, you will see that we work with a hotel in Winnipeg, multiple restaurants, hotels in Churchill, and our transportation partner in Churchill that runs our rovers. And it's very important that we know that they're meeting our expectations and abiding by specific protocols when running their trips. So we vet our vendors. What we also do is set expectations as much as possible with our guests, local partners, and communities that we're working with to let them know how everyone will be participating in mitigating their own risk. So even with you traveling to polar bear programs, when you get your pre-departure briefing, which will be about 30 days prior to the start of your trip, what you're also going to get is hand sanitizer. You're going to get a KN95 face masks. You'll get alcohol sanitation wipes so that you are ready to start mitigating your risk as soon as you leave the house, which is incredibly important now that we are traveling in a time of COVID. And then we also have a tremendous amount of training that happens. All of our expedition leaders and field staff, before a season begins, goes through an intensive training with myself to ensure that they understand how to implement the protocols that we have in place. And we continue to monitor the changes that are happening so incredibly rapidly on at least a weekly basis, if not bi-weekly. So our COVID task force is meeting at least once a week to be looking at updated recommendations, updated guidance, and updated stats from where we're operating around the world. So it's a tremendous endeavor. That being said, our protocols, like the CDC recommendations, are always changing. So it is very easily said that a trip that leaves tomorrow is going to look much different from a trip that leaves, let's say, in a month, 2 months, 3 months. And by the time we start our polar bear season in October and November. So we are anticipating that things are going to look different. And we thank everyone in advance for their flexibility in working with us as we communicate our new guidance. So that being said, with our current guidance, one of the large questions that people have right now is what's going on with Canada and the US with the border. So currently, the border is not open between Canada and the US, and there is a quarantine period that people need to go through for getting into Canada. That being said, we are seeing huge changes within recommendations and a lot of positive trends, which are incredibly encouraging for this polar bear season. I'm sure everyone has heard that last week the CDC made the recommendation that if you are fully vaccinated, that you do not need to wear face masks inside and or around larger groups. And that is a huge step for us because it means that we are going to be moving quicker in conversations with other countries about being able to travel as guests and tourists to another location. We're also seeing vaccination rates within Canada increase substantially, and they're looking to get more and more individuals vaccinated. And what that means is that it makes the likelihood of us, Canada opening their borders to Americans a lot more realistic and to happen a lot sooner than any of us have anticipated. Plus, we're also seeing that there is active communication about how that border opening is going to happen. So we are incredibly pleased with the process and news. We're also seeing US COVID rates go down, US vaccination rates go up, which is fantastic. It means that we are looking incredibly positive for the summer and for this season. So another large question that people have is what is Nat Hab's testing and vaccination policy? So at this point, and again, there can be changes before the start of the season, is that we are requiring, starting July 1, for all of our guests to be vaccinated prior to coming on a trip with Natural Habitat Adventures. And we do that for multiple reasons. One, we want to help mitigate the risk and spread of COVID as much as possible. So we want to enhance the safety to our guests, to our guides, to our local communities that we are going to visit. Churchill is incredibly remote. So any step that we can take to enhance that safety is a step that we need to take. And then testing we currently do not require. There is a testing requirement to come back into the US at this point. That being said, if that testing requirement is still in place, once polar bear season is running, we will facilitate that whole process for you. So essentially, you will get tested, we'll sort everything out, all the transportation, whatever needs to happen to get you tested before you come back to the US. And if that requirement is not in place, then it is not in place at that point. So with all of that being said, with changes happening as rapidly as they are, you can expect for us to reach out to you on your trips between mid-July and August on sort of next steps and where we're at, and with continued updates. So Again, we're very optimistic about the season and the trends that we're going and how quickly good news is coming our way. And when you are on your trip, you can expect to see some degree likely of protocols that we are putting in place. And we focus on a combination intervention approach, and that is the mindset that a combination of interventions is a better control than just one. So those are respiratory hygiene, physical distancing, hand hygiene, and enhanced sanitation. So there are a lot of different ways that can look like on a trip. It could very well be the case that by the time October comes and your trip's run, you might need to wear a mask when on our polar over on a plane. We are in a lucky spot where we have a very low number of trips, so it's quite easy for us to social distance on a Nat Hab trip. And we have additional staff in place to ensure that you have, we're sanitizing any gear, sanitizing, taking extra steps to sanitize our vehicles and equipment that we use. So that is something that is already in place and has been in place on all of our trips. So that being said, with our COVID protocols and everything that surrounds COVID and traveling right now, we want to start and get into the meat of this presentation, which is having Eleanor tell us about this specific, our polar bear trips, and what is so exciting about coming to Canada and seeing the polar bears. Eleanor, tell us a little bit about why this trip is so really so unique and something that you love so much.
I am so happy to be here and talking about bears. I never get enough chances to talk about bears, so let's so happy to be here, and let's dive right into it. So you can see the image up on the screen right now has a couple of big yellow arrows on it. Put this up here to remind us of the fact that this trip really takes place over a couple of different destinations, both Winnipeg, where you're going to be arriving, whether you're flying or driving, and then of course our transfer up to Churchill itself, where we're going to be going out and viewing those bears. Now, as Ben kind of mentioned in the introduction, Churchill it's a really unique, special place. And it's really, I think we would be accurate in saying that it's close to the hearts of pretty well everybody who works at Natural Habitat for a whole host of different reasons. It's well known globally as pretty much the best polar viewing destination anywhere you can get to. But aside from the polar bears, which don't worry, we will talk about, we have other wildlife that we're going to be talking about as well, including a whole host of Arctic species that we have a chance of seeing in Churchill. We have the town itself, which, when you look at it, looks pretty remote and pretty small, and you know what? It is. But it's so full of people who care, who have such interesting stories and such interesting ways of moving through life, as well as the landscape itself, which I think when you come up and see it, you'll agree with me that it just has this barren beauty to it that you'll have a hard time experiencing anywhere else. But of course, like I said, before we can head up to Churchill, your trip really does start in Winnipeg from the moment of your arrival. And I really want to emphasize that your trip starts here. We start taking care of you as soon as your feet hit the ground in Winnipeg. And I love this photo of our airport. It's just, do you love it too, Renata? It just seems so wacky to me.
It's also just so bright color. You can't help but smile when you look at the Winnipeg airport. Whenever I land, I'm always just so happy.
It makes me happy to see it, and you'll see these bright lights, and you come down the stairs into the arrival area, and you'll see one of us wearing, a Natural Habitat jacket or shirts beside a giant picture of a polar bear. And this is where we're gonna kind of take you up and take care of you from this moment onwards. So from luggage transfers to our hotel in Winnipeg, we have you the whole way. The hotel that we stay at in Winnipeg is, there's our vehicle that we might be doing transfers in. Here's the Fort Garry Hotel. And it's our main hotel that we use in Winnipeg for all of our Churchill-based trips, and it's the one that we use for all of our bear trips. It's gorgeous, it's old, it's ornate, it's got a level of customer service that, you know, we love as staff members, and I know you will love as well. And once you arrive at the Fort Garry Hotel, this is really our home base for those of us who are based in Winnipeg, and where we really get you ready for heading up to Churchill. And the main way that we want to assist you in getting ready is making sure that you have the gear that you need to stay warm and safe and comfortable when you're in Churchill. So you can see that this guest here is wearing this beautiful blue parka, a nice warm hood, and some nice snow boots, right? So these, this parka and boots are all provided by Natural Habitat. We have a huge gear room that we have set up with a variety of sizes. And once you arrive, you know, if you want them for Winnipeg, for walking around, we can get you sorted out right away. These jackets are built for life in Churchill, so we always recommend that you come check out our gear. It's always going to be kind of what we know works well in Churchill. So you can see here a group of people who are all standing on the shores of Hudson Bay, and I guarantee you it's quite windy right now, and we were all completely warm. Some people who do come from colder areas who have good ski gear may choose to use their own boots and parkas. Whatever you're most comfortable in, of course, but we know that our stuff works really well, and it's there for your use during the trip. I know a lot of our guides end up using the gear as well, because we know it's really good.
Absolutely. It's also just one less massive thing to pack. So I know that I don't have to bring boots, which is fantastic, and I know that I don't have to bring a parka, which is a huge lift to my luggage leaving Colorado. So yeah, the fact that you don't have to purchase boots or a parka to come on this trip is absolutely incredible. And the care that our team takes in making sure that you've got the boots that are the right fit and the jacket that fits snug and your layers underneath is fantastic. But it doesn't just stop with the custom jackets and boots. Eleanor, tell us about how we're getting up to Churchill.
Oh, well, like you say, we really pride ourselves on being a full service luxury travel. So this is possibly one of my favorite parts of working with Natural Habitat, is the fact that when we fly out to Churchill for bear season, we are flying up in our own private plane. So this will be possibly the easiest flying experience you have ever had. We load up on a bus at the Fort Garry Hotel. We transfer to the airport via that private bus, and the bus will pull up right to that plane, right on the tarmac. It's a few steps to get onto that plane, and from there on, we are off heading to Churchill so quickly. And I know that for me, Renata, I know you fly a lot as well, that I've always felt that these flights are some of like the most spacious and comfortable that I've ever been on. I think I can cross my legs comfortably, and I'm a tall person in these seats.
Absolutely. I love flying to Churchill. There's also, for some reason, no turbulence ever. And I actually get a little scared when I fly, but it's the most relaxing flight. And it's wonderful to just see the sparse, how just sparse everything is when you're flying. So though you're not looking at drastic mountains, it is beautiful, beautiful scenery to look out the window when you are flying, which is fantastic.
It really is. It's a great view the whole way up. And I know that a lot of people, this might be their first experience on a turboprop aircraft, but you'll always want to fly turboprop after this, I think. It's my favorite way to fly.
Absolutely. So once we land in Churchill, which I don't know if many people know this, but you can't actually drive from Winnipeg to Churchill. There are no roads, but surprisingly enough, we are picked up by wonderful buses once we arrive at the airport. Eleanor, tell us a little bit about who's going to be moving us around when we're in Churchill.
Yeah, wonderful buses, wonderful bus drivers. It's great across the board. So we have a local transportation company who does provide our transport on the ground in Churchill called Great White Bear Tours. You'll see their name a lot of places that you go in Churchill. And like Renata said, despite the fact that there aren't any roads to Churchill, we have this fleet of beautiful, spacious, comfortable, and reliable buses. Ask your expedition leader someday about how all these things get to Churchill, because there are stories behind every large piece of equipment. As you can see from the interior shots, we're always working below the capacity of these vehicles. So take a look. There's lots of empty seats, lots of space for whether it's big jackets or your day packs or just to spread out. Very comfortable experience.
Yeah, they are absolutely wonderful buses, and the fact that the amount of back end support that nobody sees if a bus, if there is ever an issue, because it is Churchill, and I mean the winters can get down to -30. There is support there in 2 seconds, which is absolutely phenomenal. So we have these wonderful buses as our ground transport as we move around Churchill and the surrounding area. But one of the things that I know that is on everyone's mind, it's definitely on my mind whenever I'm about to travel or researching travel, is, especially being a vegetarian and having some dietary restrictions, is what is the food going to be like? And am I going to be able to eat while I'm on the trip? Tell us a little bit about the culinary experiences that we will get on this program.
Absolutely. So yeah, and myself too, I've got some dietary restrictions. I'm also a vegetarian. Any of those like pretty standard dietary restrictions, we will absolutely take care of you the whole way through. It is important to let us know ahead of time what those restrictions are so that we can be prepared for your arrival. And so that no matter what those are, we can make sure that the food that's safe for you can be in Churchill. As we said, it is a remote area. It is fly-in or train-in only. So make sure that we have time to get those special foods up to Churchill for you ahead of time. But unlike some of the other trips that have been running since last July, like Renata mentioned, we're not going to be eating outdoors at all. We're eating indoors because it's chilly, it's windy, there's bears outside. We eat indoors for all of our meals, but they're always meals with our group. So it might be a meal in a local restaurant. It might be a meal on one of our polar rovers, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But no matter where you are in Churchill, there will always be enough food, including for those special diets. It might be a little bit stodgy, tends to be a little bit carb heavy in my experience, because again, it's a remote area. So it will be relatively plain food, but I promise you that we will get you fed and it'll be a great experience.
Absolutely. Pretty much all dietary requirements, whether you are vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, does not matter. It can be taken care of on that trip. On this trip, excuse me. So, and you're fed wonderfully. There is a saying that you'll never go hungry on a Nat Hab trip, and that is very, very true. Everyone that is working at all of these restaurants and creating your rover meals take incredible care and love polar bear season as much as we do, and love interacting with our guests as much as we do. So it is not just the food that you're coming for, but also the experience in the locations that you're eating, and those individuals that own that restaurants, own those restaurants, and who you're chatting with. So we've chatted about food, we've talked about the transportation that's moving us around. Next question everyone asks is, what is the accommodation in Churchill like? You noted it's very, very remote. I'm sure we don't have a Hilton up there, but tell me a little bit about what our guests can expect in terms of accommodation and sleeping arrangements.
Yeah, so your accommodations are of course going to depend on what your itinerary is. Within the town of Churchill, we have a few hotels that we work with. There's different names, but they're all in the same area, and they all offer a comparable level of service and amenities. So this is an example of one. This is the Seaport Hotel. It's right on Kelsey Boulevard, which is our main street. Coming up as an example of an interior shot from one of our hotels. So you can see it's got all the things you need in a hotel and very little that you don't. If you're traveling to our Tundra Lodge, which some of our itineraries do, this is what it looks like from the outside. So there is a lounge car, a dining car, and a couple of those sleeper cars, similar to how you might find in a train. And what those sleeper cars look on the inside and to where you might expect to sleep looks like this. So you can see it is a relatively small area, just like we would have in a train car, but these ones have a window out right onto the Tundra. So those are a couple of our different types of accommodation that you're going to come across in Churchill.
Fantastic. They are all very comfortable and run by absolutely amazing people. I've been working with them for years and absolutely adore all of the staff that are and hotel owners that are up there. So now I want to get into a really, really important component of our programs. And I would say what separates us from a lot of other companies, if not all other companies, other than the fact that we go up to polar bear season and we run very small group tours, which you don't see very often, but we have amazing expedition leaders that have been working up here forever. But Eleanor, please tell us a little bit more about your role in the other expedition leaders that we have that guide these trips.
Yeah, thanks, Renata. That's feels a little bit like tooting their own horns a little bit, but I can say that when I first started with Natural Habitat as an expedition leader, I was completely blown away by the caliber of all the guides out there. You will not find a more knowledgeable, a more caring, or a more enthusiastic expedition leader. So no matter who you are traveling with, you can count on them to be the ones who know where best to look for bears, to make those decisions on the ground as to how to get you the best viewing experience, to come at you with a fountain of knowledge about bear behavior and bear biology, and ultimately to really be supporting you throughout your entire trip and making sure that you're getting the experience that you're expecting out of this trip.
Absolutely. And every expedition leader, your expedition leader loves this trip, the people, everyone is so connected. And I think you just see that in every conversation and story that you hear from our expedition leaders. I have been in so many conversations talking about the last 5, 10, 15 years and just the evolutions of our programs, the evolutions of town. So hearing those stories and diving into the history from the expedition leaders' perspective, just from how much love they have for this place and this trip is absolutely incredible. So before we talk about the actual bear viewing, there's other things that we do on this trip. We definitely go see bears, but what do we do when we're not seeing bears on our polar bear trips?
Believe it or not, there are other things to see in Churchill besides bears. I know it seems like in a town of 800 people, what kind of services could there be and what other things are there to do? One of our kind of premier experiences is really a visit to the Itineraries Museum. So this is an Inuit art and cultural museum where we get some time to look around and we get a brief presentation from a curator. And whether you're on a lodge trip or a town-based trip, this is always somewhere we're going to try to get to. We're also going to explore around town, and like Ben mentioned, Churchill has a really unique way of coexisting with bears. And we'll talk about some of the ways that the town supports the conservation of bears, one of which is this polar bear holding facility that we use to separate bears from humans. So we can't go into it, but we can go see the outside of it and talk about bear conservation. And like you'll see, there's a beautiful mural on the side of this building, and there are other murals throughout town as well. For anybody with an artistic bent, I think it's a bit of a surprise to have all of these murals jump out at you as you move around town. It's really fantastic. And of course, we don't stop there. We might also get a chance to spend time at Parks Canada. So Parks Canada is our national parks organization, and they have some really top-notch interpreters and interpretive stories that they're going to present to us. And we also want to make sure that we're really getting the chance to connect with the local community, because I know that there's bears and they're wonderful, and of course we're going to go out and we're going to see the bears, but I would never want anybody to come to Churchill without the chance to really at least experience some immersion into that local culture, whether it's spending time with a local artist, whether it's spending time with a local Indigenous elder, or one of our really popular things that we do on all of our trips is spending time with some of the other local people or dogs, as the case may be. So we do include dog sledding on all of our itineraries, and I think it's one of the most fun things that we have out there. Honestly, it's fun for us, it's fun for the dogs. Whether there's a lot of snow on the ground or not, we can still make sure that we're getting out, whether it's in a cart or a sled. And Dog sledding, believe it or not, is still a really important part of a lot of northern culture, and it is still actively practiced. So we'll get a chance to learn more about what dog sledding looks like and why people still choose to do it, as well as getting out for a short run ourselves with those animals.
The dog sledding experience is, you don't even need to go dog sledding. Just watching how excited the dogs get when they know that they're about to run is A, the coolest sounding thing in the world. B, just, they are so happy. I love everything about the dog sledding experience that we have in Churchill. Which dog sledding leads us to, I think, the thing that everyone is here to see, which is what does a Nat Hab day of viewing polar bears look like, and why is this the right choice of the trip to take? So tell me a little bit about what the polar bear viewing experience feels like for a guest.
Absolutely. So I think there's two really important parts of what sets our bear viewing apart from some other companies that I want to point out. And the first and biggest one, I think, is the kind of vehicle that we're moving around in. So we, like I said, operate with our transportation provider, Great White Bear, and they have these big machines called polar rovers that are able to move around the landscape in a safe and comfortable way for our bear viewing. We'll get to an interior shot in a second, but first I want to also tell you how where we go for bear viewing is also unique and important. So it's not just how we're doing it, it's where we are in the first place. So outside the town of Churchill and adjacent to one of our national parks is an area called the Churchill Wildlife Management Area. This is a protected area that is specifically set aside for non-commercial use, specifically by wildlife, like the name suggests. So there are very few permits that are allowed in the WMA for companies to come in and do bear viewing. This is a preferred bear habitat, so obviously it's where we want to get to for that bear viewing. And Great White Bear, and by extension Natural Habitat, are one of those organizations that get to go in there into that wonderful habitat to where those bears are to really get that best possible experience of viewing bears the whole way along that we go. And the machines themselves, I mean, look at this. Isn't it fantastic? I want to be in there right now looking at bears. This is the inside of one of these polar rovers, and it's so big. They look big when you see them. They are big, and they feel big on the inside too. You can see that there's plenty of seating. So we, like always, we operate at half capacity or less within these machines. So everybody always gets a window seat. There is never any jostling for space along the windows or on the back deck. And I've always found when I'm out on the land with guests that even if you get a bear, right up at the front, everybody still gets a great viewing spot. You never feel like you're overcrowded at all within the space. Now, this is where we're spending a lot of our day, right? We are out there. The way to see bears is to go out where the bears are. So we will feed you on the polar rover as well. We will give you coffee, we will give you tea, we will give you snacks, we will give you lunches and suppers as the case may be. And you will, again, never go hungry on the rovers, and we will keep you caffeinated as well, which is also important when you're bumping across the landscape. It can be a little bit of a rocking you to sleep as you go sometimes.
I love our rover meals are absolutely incredible. Phenomenal food.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell us what the actual viewing of the bears looks like and what that can feel like.
Yeah, so the viewing of the bears, of course, is going to depend mostly on what choices that bear is making around our machine. Right, so just like with any wildlife, we're always leaving it up to the animal to choose if they're coming up to us or not. Polar bears, especially the young ones, tend to be quite curious, so it's not unusual to get one who might approach the machine quite close, or even to get their front paws up like this one is doing here. Now, from the front, when you see that, you can, what it looks like when you're looking down, it can be just this face-on view of a bear. So that might be the kind of view that we end up seeing. We might have a different experience if that bear is closer to the back deck. So we do have that open air deck at the back of the rover, and anytime the machine is not physically moving, you're always free to go out there for whether it's a breath of fresh air, whether it's to view wildlife. So they will sometimes come up to that back as well. And even if the bears are up alongside the machine, you can still end up with a good view. That back deck is not solid underneath. It is a grill, so you can see right through it in case the bear does choose to walk underneath the deck. So we've really tried to maximize what those views look like and gotten to the point where unless the bear's really, really trying to hide, you're going to be able to see that bear.
So very true. And I love the, even if you find one bear, there's usually another one around the corner, but it's not just looking at the one bear, you're looking at what is actually happening in their day-to-day lives. Tell me a little bit about what some behaviors we can expect are.
Yeah, and as a naturalist and then somebody who really loves to go out there and see the animals within their natural habitat, and I know a lot of our guests have that same consideration, right? You want to go out there where the bears are, to see them move through the landscape they move through, to see them interacting with the other animals that are in the landscape. So the thing that gets me the most excited when I'm out there and viewing bears is seeing the bears walking across a lake that's about to freeze, seeing how they navigate thin ice, seeing how two bears, when they come together in the same spot, when they're waiting for the sea ice to freeze, what kind of interactions can they have in that case? You know, whether it's two males in this case who are sparring, they're doing that play fighting type of activity, or whether it's a female and her cubs trying to avoid those males. So we can watch that activity from that safety of the rover, from those great vantage points. And one of the great things about Churchill is that there's not a lot of landscape features to get in the way of that viewing. So even if the bears are 100 feet off, it's not like you got a giant copse of trees or a mountain in the way. It's pretty well flat everywhere you go.
Absolutely. There's views for days. And I love that we spend a lot of time on these rovers. Each day that you're out on the rover, you're out for from about 8 to 4 p.m. So it is a long day on the rover, which is fantastic. There's a restroom on the rover, which makes life easy for everyone. But when we're out there, we're not just seeing polar bears. As amazing as these animals are, there's the amount that's going on in Churchill and in this wildlife area is absolutely incredible. Before we go into questions, Eleanor, would you tell us a little bit about some of the other wildlife that we might see?
I'd love to. So the one that you've got up on the screen right now, this is the Arctic hare. Sometimes it feels like my personal nemesis because they're so hard to spot. They look like little fluffy balls of snow that don't move. So because of these animals tend to be Arctic adapted, they are often white on snow. They can be harder to spot than polar bears, so they are so much fun to go out and look for. So whether it's that Arctic hare, whether it's the Arctic fox, which will turn a beautiful white color when that snow starts coming down, whether it's the white-phased gyrfalcon. So these birds tend to stay up in Churchill throughout, kind of towards the end of bear season before they migrate back south. So this is a migratory bird, but they do stay late. Snowy owls are also migratory birds to the area who tend to stay into bear season as well. Also white, sometimes with those black flecks, also difficult to spot on the ground. One of the common animals that you may have where you are, but we tend to get in Churchill a little bit showier, are the red foxes. And in Churchill, red foxes aren't just red, they may be gray or black, or this beautiful, what we call a cross fox, which is a combination of red and black coloring. The species is the red fox, and then the color pattern can be quite different. So they can be very, very striking animals. And then one of my favorite birds, I think, we all love them, might hear them sometimes called tundra chickens. These are ptarmigan. These ones in particular are willow ptarmigan. So we see them in the winter hiding in low clumps of willow. So they are also quite well camouflaged, but fun to find. And then with the ptarmigan, the only other bird that overwinters in the Churchill area and will be present throughout the entirety of bear season, Northern Lights season, and through the summer is the raven. And I think a lot of Churchillians and Manitobans feel a special affinity for the raven because it sticks around just like we do. It's there the whole year too.
I love that. We have guides that are absolutely obsessed with the raven. So though it's not something you would really expect to see on a polar bear journey, it is really fascinating to learn more about these birds as well. Well, Eleanor, thank you so much for all of the detailed information that you gave us regarding our polar bear trips. I want to leave some time for questions, and I also want to note again that we will be doing some more specific trip-focused follow-up webinars to answer additional details, especially as we get closer to the start of the season. With all things COVID, things are changing like rapid fire, so we want to make sure that we are giving you as our guests the most up-to-date information. So as I think, Kendall, we are probably ready for some questions if there are any.
Absolutely. I've got some really great questions for you. And I just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you have a question today, you can submit that in your control panel under the questions field. And we do have a lot of questions, and unfortunately, we will not be able to get to all of them today. So if we do not answer your question, please do not hesitate to get in touch with your adventure specialist. They're always here to help you. Okay, first question. Let's get to some gear questions. Someone's wondering what the average temperature is going to be for their trip in October. So I was hoping if you could talk a little bit about temperatures throughout the entire season and what gear would be great to bring that is not provided.
Absolutely. So because this is a transitional season, we can have a really large variety of temperatures. We've had everything up to about like maybe 55 degrees in some of the earlier October trips, all the way down to, I think it got down to -40 a couple of years ago in a November trip. So there is a huge range of potential temperatures, and what we always come back to is layers, layers, layers. So we're going to give you that great outer jacket, and it's warm and it's waterproof and it's windproof. What other things you're going to want to bring, and maybe you're thinking about this now because the winter gear sales are on, right? Think about another mid-range layer that you can bring. So a fleece or a puffy jacket to go underneath that, or if you just need a little light layer to wear inside the rover if the windows are open and it's a little bit chilly. You don't need your big parka. It's a great thing to have for that. Always my personal recommendation is to bring up some good pairs of socks. You can't go wrong with good socks. Yeah, I would also add to that, just bring some gloves or mittens as well as a warm hat. Do you have any other recommendations on the gear front, Renata?
Socks and a fleece is key. Also, pair of slippers or some comfy tennis shoes for walking around the hotel once you take your boots off is a nice addition as well.
Do you recommend bringing snow pants or ski goggles?
Once we get into those November trips, if you have a trip booked from mid-November onwards, snow pants would not be a bad idea. And I'm not talking necessarily heavy snow pants, but more of a windbreaker layer, just enough to take the edge off. Because in Churchill, what really gets you is that wind. It can also be nice if when you're going dog sledding, if there's any snowpack inside the sled, it provides another extra barrier between you and any snow. Though we will, of course, have blankets on the dog sleds. As far as snow goggles go, I would make the same recommendations in that case. We don't have most people who find that they need to use goggles. And if you do, we have some the various dog mushers do have some lowers available if you really need something to put over your eyes in that case. But usually it's not too bad during that fall season.
Okay, great. And you mentioned that parkas and boots are available. Is that the same case for kids?
We do have some children's sizing. So depending on what size that you might need, have a conversation with your adventure specialist about whether that's a size that we stock, because I don't think we have anything for 4-year-olds, but we definitely have ones for 10 years old and up or thereabouts.
Okay, perfect. And there were some questions about camera gear. What do you recommend bringing in? Someone in particular was wondering if it's possible to use a tripod on the back deck of the rovers.
Sure. So like Renata said, there's going to be other follow-up webinars that will include specific information, like for photo trips, for example. I've seen and I've gotten myself great photos with cell phones, with a point and shoot camera, or with a more professional camera with a longer lens. And in fact, sometimes those long lenses can be frustrating if you have a bear really close to you and the lens is too big to shoot with. If you were to bring a tripod, there is some space out on the back deck. Sometimes we'll also set up a spotting scope back there. And what you would need to keep in mind then is that, of course, that back deck has a grill on it. So we just need to position it carefully so your tripod legs don't fall down or slip into the grill and you end up with a shaky image.
Mm-hmm. And what about, oh, go ahead.
You jump in and we do, it is, if you have them or think of it, putting tennis balls on the bottom of your tripod stands is helpful. We do have a few extra ones of those as well. We just need some a little bit of advance notice.
Yes, yeah, I should say as well for camera equipment that we have on hand, we always have bean bags if you need something to stabilize your camera with. So that's not something that you need to travel with.
Okay, great. And what about money? Is US currency accepted up there?
US currency is widely accepted within Churchill, but it will not always be accepted at whatever the exchange rate is. It will usually be accepted at a 1-for-1 value, and then any change that you get will come back to you in Canadian dollars. Visa and MasterCard are, of course, widely accepted, as is debits, so it's easy to do a lot of your stuff without anything else besides plastic.
All right. Someone is wondering about luggage storage at the Fort Garry. Is that possible so they don't have to bring everything to Churchill?
Do you want to take that one, Renata? I feel like the queen of the luggage logistics.
All about the luggage. So it is possible to leave some things in Winnipeg. That being said, since you're only in Winnipeg for 2 nights, I would recommend that you can leave your shoes, for example, if for some reason you're not wanting those because you'll be taking those boots. But I would just recommend packing a little bit lighter. The same things that you would wear in Winnipeg, you would wear in Churchill, and because you're coming back for a night or 2, makes sense to think a little bit about the packing so you can bring it with it. But if you are in need of storing some items, or if you have a different jacket that you want to store because you'll be using one of ours, you would absolutely be able to leave that in Winnipeg. We'll tag it with your name and we'll bring it, make sure it is available to you when you return on that charter flight. You'll come back to where you got those boots and parkas and retrieve your jacket or shoes that you left.
Okay, great. And a few people wanted to know how long it takes to get to and from the Tundra for your bear viewing.
Great question. It's usually about a half-hour drive. So by road, it's not that far. It's about a 10 to 12 kilometers outside town. Nope, I'm getting that wrong. 10 to 12 miles outside town, about 20 kilometers. But it is a gravel road and it's a little bit twisty and turny, so we take it over about half an hour to get out there. You get up in the morning, you have some breakfast, pop on the bus, and by the time you've finished your coffee and your eyes are fully open, you are on your rover.
All right, and speaking of rovers, there's a few questions that I'm just going to combine all in one. Someone's wondering if it's 1 bathroom or 2 on the rovers, if binoculars are provided, as well as blankets or pillows if you want to take a little nap.
All right, I'll try to get all 3 of those in one. So there is 1 washroom on the rover. There's only 15 or 16 of us on the machine, so we've never had any issues with 1 not being enough. It's quite plenty. Binoculars, we heavily encourage you to bring your own. It both helps with sanitation as well as you always being sure that you've got your pair and you know how to use it really well. I know most of the expedition leaders will often have a spare set, but sometimes those go walking, so always best to bring your own with you. And I've already forgotten number 3. I got so excited about binoculars.
Blankets and pillows.
Blankets and pillows. So no blankets and pillows, but what I have seen a lot of people use is those jackets. So you will want to bring that big Nat Hab jacket with you. It'll be critical for when you're on that back deck viewing bears, but when you're inside the rover and the windows are up and you're nice and warm, just wad that up into a little pillow and curl up against the window and you'll be out like a light.
All right, great. And I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to try to cram a few more questions in here. Someone is wondering about laundry service, and also will Wi-Fi be available on the Tundra Lodge or at any of the Churchill hotels?
Yeah, so I'll take the Wi-Fi one first. There is Wi-Fi available at all of the Churchill hotels. The internet service in Churchill is not bad, but it's not great. So you will get enough Wi-Fi to do emailing and stuff like that. Sometimes there's enough for uploading photos. On the Tundra Lodge, there is no cell phone service, nor is there any Wi-Fi. So it's really meant to be an experience where you're out there on that remote lodge. And I clearly can't be trusted to answer 2 questions at once, Kendall. You better give me the other one again.
Laundry service, is that available anywhere?
So we would definitely recommend that you bring as much clothing as you feel that you need for your trip. The hotels will sometimes be able to assist with laundry service, but it would more be of an exception. If anything occurred and you happen to spill coffee all on the inside of your bag, we can certainly facilitate that for you, but we'd like people to plan for having enough essential clothing to get you through your trip.
All right, great. And here's another suitcase related question, Renata. Can someone bring a hard suitcase, or are there any specific styles that are required, and also any weight limits?
Yes, so that information will be outlined within the pre-departure briefing, and a hard-sided luggage is fine. That will essentially once you get to Churchill, your luggage will be in the hotel for the duration of the time, and then it will go back. We do ask that guests do look at those recommendations within the pre-departure briefing when they are headed before they start packing, just to make sure they're sort of abiding by those guidelines. It can be difficult because we do have a charter aircraft for if everyone's bringing like 2 very oversized bags, that can be a bit much. And if that was the case, we might have to leave some luggage to come up a little bit later in the day, and we want to get everyone's luggage on the same flight.
All right, great. And I'm going to end today with a few vaccine related questions, Renata. Someone is wondering, they thought they heard you say that even though all travelers will be vaccinated, there is some chance that masks on the rover will be required. Is this true?
Yeah, so when it comes to the our mask requirements, so we have to also abide by the local government recommendations. So if it is the case that Canada is requiring masks to be worn inside, we just have to be flexible with what that looks like. So it could be the case that masks need to be worn inside those vehicles, but again, we're so many months away from the start of this trip, and we are, last Thursday we had a pretty substantial change, so things are changing pretty quickly. We ask that people are flexible and ready to pop on a mask if that is the local recommendation. But again, a trip leaving tomorrow is going to be very different from a trip leaving after the summer in October and November.
Of course. And really quickly, I'm going to jump back to that weight limit. Our polar bear trip manager is on, and she wants to clarify it's a 50-pound max for luggage. Okay, next question. What proof do we need that we've been vaccinated?
That is a fantastic question. So currently, we will be having our guests send us a copy, a scanned copy of their vaccination card. Again, everything's changing very, very rapidly, so it could be the case that there's a different proof that is necessary by October, but we will be sure to update everyone that is traveling with us on whatever those updated needs are, if they do change, and then if it is the case that there's sort of steps or a link that you need to go to for, let's say, if Canada is requiring something specifically, we're going to make sure you have all of that information to ensure that it is easy as possible.
All right, and this next question is about potential booster shots this fall. Do you know anything about that? And if you're leaving in October and you've been vaccinated since February, would you need a booster?
Another great question. So at this point, we don't have any solidified information on boosters or the timeline of when or if a booster shot would be needed and within what time frame that would be. However, again, we meet regularly as a COVID task force in our office, and if we are seeing any changes to CDC recommendations and local government regulations before the start of the trip, we will be sure to update any guests that would be impacted, and that's the case for guests in going to Canada, Mexico, Botswana, wherever it is. We are staying on top of those changes as quickly as they are happening.
All right, and I know we're past the top of the hour, so I'm just going to do one more question before we call it today. If testing remains in place for returns, what happens if one tests positive at the end of a trip?
So if I sound a little bit like a broken record, but it is so hard to discuss what is going to be happening a few months from now, because we will be facilitating the process of these tests. What we will also have access to is multiple tests for individuals if it was the case that they did test positive, whether it was a false positive or whatever that would be, to ensure that we have a secondary test. And then we will be, if need be, working with the local physicians on sort of next steps that we would need to take there, but we would absolutely ensure that we had a secondary test possible, or even a third test that could be taken, just to make sure that we are getting the most accurate result from that test.
Absolutely. All right, well, I'm going to call it there with questions. Eleanor and Renata, thank you so much for taking the time to present today. We covered a lot of ground, and I know we answered a lot of questions, but if we didn't get to a question today, for those watching, just please don't hesitate to get in touch with your adventure specialist. They're always here to help you out. And of course, we're always going to keep you updated as soon as we're aware of any changes that take place. All right, ladies, I'm going to hand it back over to you for closing comments. Let's start with Eleanor.
Thanks, Kendall, and thanks to all of you for taking the time to pop on today and learn more about this trip. I'd like to extend a real special thanks to Renata and the entire COVID team, because I know as somebody who's out in the field with the guests and with the local communities, I am just so grateful for all the work that has gone on into making sure that all of these seasons are running so well and so safely. So thank you so much for all this work.
And Renata.
Thanks for that, Eleanor. We do our darnest. Eleanor, thank you so much for joining. Kendall, as always, thank you so much for facilitating. And to everyone that is on this call, We are so excited to have you out. We are so excited to see positive news continue to come up as we move through the next few months. So thank you for taking the time to pop on to this webinar. We look forward to having you on the next webinar to talk more specific details about your trips. And we hope that you love Churchill as much as Eleanor and I do. It is so deep and connected to our hearts. So we're very excited to have you out.
Eleanor and Renata, thanks again so much, and my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in. We did record today, and so we'll have the replay emailed out to you very soon. And with that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.